Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf where we talk about books. You'll notice in today's video the lighting is a little bit different. I've been experimenting, I'm trying to find the right kind of lighting setup, especially with the backlighting being the hardest to accomplish since my shelves are right there and I didn't really know how best to get backlighting. But I ended up getting these little lights off of Amazon on Prime Day. They're about $25 Canadian each, and they're pretty impressive for all of the features that they have. And so we'll see how they do for today's video. But in the meantime, for the topic of today, I wanted to share what I've been currently reading. Summer break has thrown quite the wrench into my reading, and I am slowly getting back into routine as we are settling into the new routine for the summer, which of course I am sure will change again with back to school. But in the meantime, let's talk about the most recent book that I finished. Hell for Hire by Rachel Aaron is book one in the Tear Down Heaven series, and this isn't one that I would typically pick up. However, the tagline for it, the cover, all drew me in, and the feedback I had heard from my wonderful friend Esme, I knew I needed to give this a try. And I was not disappointed. The reason why I say I wasn't sure if this was going to really be for me, it's not something I normally dive into, is because it is mainly an urban fantasy. And I have tried many times over the years to get into urban fantasy and just something never really clicked for me. This, on the other hand, it has witches, demons. It's still in that urban fantasy setting, but I feel like it was so much more about the story and the characters, much more about the characters, this motley crew that comes together and takes on an enormous task of trying to tear down heaven. It was just so well done, and I ended up devouring it in chunks of 20-30%. I had a really hard time putting it down, and the audiobook narration was phenomenal to top it all off. That being said, I don't know if I've changed as a reader or if it's just the way Rachel Aaron has done this one that it clicks so well for me, whereas other urban fantasy has not in the past. I might have to test that out to see in the future, but Rachel Aaron is definitely an author I will be reading more from. I believe she has over 20 books written to her name. Fantastic. So I am looking forward to delving more into her writing. But in the meantime, Hell for Hire, like I said, is an urban fantasy. We've got witches, demons, we have a talking cat, that motley crew, some great humor in there, and dynamics between those characters. We have some feel good moments and some cheer for these character moments, which I always love as well. If I try and rack my brain as to why this works so well, I think it's because there was far less of the mundane world. While we do have moments and settings in Seattle, for example, we spend much of our time so closely packed with these demonic characters and the witch that we don't really spend a whole lot of time with the details of the mundane. We spend a lot of time in a dark Blackwood forest that's filled with magic, and these characters who are just completely wholesome, and I love them. They have such a great vibe to them. They really jump off the page, but then you also mix that in with the an insane level of threat. Think of the king of heaven coming down on these characters and their fight to tear down heaven. That's gonna be a big high stakes. So I was fully invested. They are just trying to survive, and how their dynamics and helping one another inadvertently ends up progressing the story as well as their own character developments was just a wild ride, and I loved every moment of it. So yes, for all of those reasons, it didn't really feel like the typical urban fantasy that I've read, and I might be wrong on this front because it's been a while since I've read an urban fantasy, and the ones that I read may have been more ingrained in the mundane world setting, but This was so much fun. If you are looking for a binge-worthy read, I highly recommend this. It felt refreshing, it felt unique. Love the characters, and plus you have a talking cat. How much better can that get? After that, I read Once We Flew by Nikki Lee. This is a novella and a sci-fi. I was really in the mood for something a little different, especially after delving into an urban fantasy for the first time. I kind of wanted to keep that train going with some different genres. This just popped up on my Twitter feed and I wanted to give it a try, and I'm so glad I did. I'm also very grateful that the author had an audiobook done of this because I did end up listening to the audiobook while I was getting some chores done, and the performance that Anna Mast gave was spectacular. So it just is one I would really recommend if you're looking for a nice, steady, fast-paced story that really grips you and doesn't really let you go. It's also quite emotional. It has some wholesome moments, but it just really digs into your heart and doesn't let go. And I loved that wild ride with it. Essentially, we are following the fourth generation that's been stranded on the planet of Savine, which also had some Dune vibes, with the setting being basically a sandy planet with very little promise of life-sustaining ability aside from breathable air. So, 4 generations ago, a massive ship carrying a generation ship from Earth crashed on this planet, and since then, survivors have been trying to do just that, surviving on a hostile desert planet. And the tech is failing, the sands are encroaching, and people are dying or getting very ill. The rescue is still generations away, or not coming at all, depending, and no one knows what's going to happen next, but each generation is just trying to survive. That's where the story follows one character, Marsa. She's an older woman, a survivor, but also an outcast, and she is infected with this disease known as a chrysalis, which gives its inhabitants some odd abilities, and this has caused Marsa to keep her space from others. The story itself picks up when a young boy comes knocking at Marsa's door, insisting that his mother wishes to see her on her deathbed to tell her one last thing. She will speak to no one else but Marsa. And so Marsa returns to this dwindling city, town, not even a city, just a decrepit piece of humanity that is trying to survive, and says her final goodbyes to her old friend. Here's where it gets a little tricky though, because Marsa's friend didn't just want to say goodbye. She wanted to give her one last message, a means of hope for their people, but it'll send Marsa into the inhospitable sands and on a journey she might not come back from, with one shred of hope that Marsa questions along the way. This story really delves into a human experience, the one not only of survival, but of trying to find purpose, to try and maintain hope, to keep carrying on even though you gave up on yourself years ago. And what is there to live for if no one is coming? How do we fix things ourselves, and what hope could there be? All of these themes, and I just really appreciated how Nikki Lee dealt with all of those aspects between Marsa's character and another side character that does end up crossing her way as well. But it was such a well streamlined novella. I really enjoyed it. It's only 106 pages, but I read it, I listened to it in one sitting. It was so easy to digest, and yet I felt entirely moved. My heart felt warm after, and I have been left with so many questions, so much awe and wonder at the world and how things worked out, that I really would love to delve into Nikki's other books, because I feel like there's so much more to explore in her stories and her writing as a result of this. To put it simply, I think what really brought this together was the combination of the setting, the little developments along the way, the very human experience of it all, And being able to see a older character go through all of this, I adored. While I do love the younger characters and the adventures they go on, I also love seeing older characters get that limelight as the main character going on these journeys and trying to do the impossible as well. This also ends up blending science fiction, some fantasy, and mystery, which helped keep me invested because that mystery, I wanted to know, why did Marsa's friends send her off into the desert? What shred of hope could there be on a desolate planet for these people? And I loved the personal journey that Marsa went on as well while trying to abide by and honor her friend's last wish. I am rambling, but definitely go check this one out. It's one of those reads you can get done in one sitting if you want, or you can savor it at the end of it. While I do want to read more of Nikki's writing, I also felt completely satisfied, and I love that. I love when I can get that satisfied feeling out of a book, but still be left with the curiosity and the craving of wanting more in this world, just to see what more could there be. Next up is my current reads, and the first one is Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. I'm about 5 chapters in, roughly 35 pages, and oh, this one is hard to put down. And Crystal, the emotional punches, we're only at the beginning. Look at how much is left of this chunker. And it is emotionally heavy in the sense of people are just living in terrible circumstances. And it's just, yeah, I really feel for the characters, even the side characters, the ones that even don't get names. I feel bad for them and the type of world that they live in and the lives that they lead, because it just sounds like a no-win situation as much as I want these characters to thrive. So with that in mind, I'd say it's going pretty well. This does have a blending of genres so far. It's got some urban fantasy to it, bit of steampunk, mystery definitely is there, some darkness to it. It's pretty packed with all kinds of genre, flavors, and vibes. But like I said, it's a pretty dark world, and I really feel for these characters. Like I said, I'm only at the beginning and I already am invested. So I am really excited to keep reading this, and I really hope that I don't get emotionally crushed by this brick of a book. Who am I kidding? I am definitely going to get emotionally destroyed. So I do have a few books that I'm reading at the moment. I'd say 3, I think. So we have the first one, and we also have Deathless Beast by Andrew D. Meredith. Now, I have read pretty well every one of Andrew D. Meredith's books, but I have not started the Collation saga yet, and it's time. It is time to start this series. It has been nagging at me from up on my shelf for a while, but I also knew going into this that I was going to be thrown into a world that really needed my attention, and I just wanted to save it for that time. Definitely, I think now is the time, because I have tried to start this in past, and a lot of stuff went over my head. I was probably not in the right headspace, definitely not in the right headspace for it. And this time, everything is sinking in a little bit easier for me. This is such a treat in a lot of ways because of the complexity of the world. We're kind of just thrown right in, and I'm about 100 pages in so far and really enjoying it. I have a hard time explaining what's going on because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. We're really just getting to explore the world, meet some of the characters. This definitely has a classic fantasy vibe to it with paladins as an example, and we have these monk type people, priest like people who have taken vows. There's a lot going on, especially some political intrigue going on in the background. So far, we're off to a good start. I'm just hoping that my brain can keep all of the information straight as I am reading. And of course, I'm listening to the audiobook as well. Andrew D. Meredith also narrates that and does a spectacular job as always. Finally, I am reading a novella and I'm actually savoring it. I'm about halfway through, and I'll give you a little backstory as well, but this is The Gallant by Janie Wirtz. Now, you've probably noticed on the bottom shelf over here, I have been slowly collecting some of her books as I've wanted to delve into her writing, and specifically in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. And when I had posted a comment about where to start with her writing, some recommendations I got, she actually very kindly reached out to me with her own recommendation on where to start, especially if I'm looking at reading that particular series. And her recommendation was The Gallant, and she very kindly provided me an e-copy to get started. So, this novella follows Varain, and he is a celebrated gallant of Shand. When a web of conspiracies are aimed at him, he's an unwitting target, unfortunately. Lysane, who I hope I'm pronouncing that name properly, is a very unlikely woman, but steps up to try and salvage his fate. This is fantasy, very classic fantasy. The prose is incredible. There's such power and intent behind her writing. Every sentence feels like there is meaning behind it. You don't want to miss any. I don't want to miss anything. And for that reason, I'm really savoring it because I feel like there's a lot more depth to it than at first glance. This is a romance. It does follow these two characters and the relationship, but it almost feels like a drama at the same time, if that's the right term to put to it. There's quite a lot of dedication, but there are also moments that feel a little dramatic, at least compared to what I'm used to. I don't typically read romance, and this definitely has the classic romance fantasy vibe, at least from what I can tell so far, being only halfway through. That being said, though, there's a lot more at stake than a typical dramatic romantic relationship because of the state of Arain and the dedication that Lysane puts herself through to try and salvage what is left of him. And it's incredibly endearing. So I'm really curious to see what happens in the second half of this. I am enjoying it. And I would love to continue reading her writing. I do, as I said, I've got those other books there waiting for me. But it's going to be one of those ones that I do read more slowly and take my time with, and I'm okay with that. Even if I only get a few pages in, I'm okay with that because I am thoroughly enjoying it and enjoying the process of it. So, yes, I am reading The Gallant as well, and that's everything that I have recently finished and I am currently reading. I'd love to know though, what are you reading? Is it something new, exciting, something familiar, and that you love coming back to? Leave your comments down below. I always love hearing from you. Again, let me know what you think about this lighting setup. As always, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourselves.